My parents said I ruined their name, but they didn't even know who the father was. Stay with me while I tell you how everything started, and maybe you'll understand the weight I've been carrying. My name is Imani Carter. I was 19 when my world shifted. I grew up in Georgia in a family that cared more about what the neighbors thought than about what was happening inside their own home. My parents, Marvin and Denise, were deeply involved in church. Every Sunday, we sat in the same pew, perfectly dressed, smiling like the perfect family. Behind those smiles, though, everything was about image. The Carter name was something they repeated like it was holy scripture. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified but also strangely calm. I knew it wasn't the end of my life, but I also knew it would feel like the end of theirs. The day I told them, their faces twisted in disgust, not worry, not even sadness, just anger. My mother's first words were, "You've brought shame into this house." My father didn't even look at me. He stood up, paced, and muttered about how people would whisper at church, how he could never hold his head high again. They didn't ask if I was okay. They didn't ask if I was scared. They didn't even ask about the baby. All they cared about was how it looked. For them, my pregnancy wasn't a child, it was a stain. From that moment, I was cut off. My parents stopped giving me money for school supplies, food, even basic things I needed. My father told me, "If you're grown enough to do this, you're grown enough to handle it." They made it clear, I was on my own. Every day, the pressure grew. They demanded to know who the father was. My mother cornered me in the kitchen, whispering harshly so Tobias, my younger brother, wouldn't overhear. My father shouted across the living room, saying the family deserved to know the truth. But I stayed silent. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of knowing. Part of me wanted to protect myself, and another part knew the truth would only give them more reasons to turn against me. I could see the disappointment in my brother's eyes. He looked at me like I was someone else entirely, not the sister who used to help him with homework or sneak him candy when mom wasn't looking. It hurt more than I can say, but I couldn't make him understand. At night, I cried quietly, pressing my face into my pillow so no one would hear. I wasn't ashamed of the baby. I was ashamed of how alone I felt. My parents' love had conditions, and the moment I didn't fit their perfect picture, they erased me. Still, even through the fear and the isolation, I held on. I wasn't going to tell them who the father was. That secret was mine, and I wasn't giving it away. It didn't take long before the whispers started. My parents made sure of it. Instead of protecting me, they turned me into the family's dirty secret. At church, I could feel the stares, the way women pulled their children closer when I walked by. I knew why. My own mother had been telling people that I was reckless, that I had no morals, that I was the reason their family name was now dragged through the mud. I would sit in the back pew alone while they sat in the front, pretending I wasn't their daughter. Sometimes I caught my father's eye, but he always looked away, jaw clenched, as if even acknowledging me would ruin him further. People I had known since I was little suddenly avoided me. Friends I grew up with didn't return my calls. The walls of the community closed in, and I realized my parents weren't just punishing me at home. They were poisoning everyone else against me too. The hardest part was Tobias. My little brother had always been my shadow. We used to laugh in our room late at night, sharing secrets and dreams about the future. But after my parents' whispers reached him, he stopped coming around. One evening I tried to sit next to him at dinner, and he got up without a word, moving to the other side of the table. When I asked him why, he muttered, "You embarrassed us," and wouldn't look me in the eye. It felt like a knife in my chest. The more my parents spread their version of the story, the less I mattered to them. My health, my fears, the baby growing inside me, none of that was important. My mother would complain about how expensive it was to keep appearances at church now, how donations had slowed because people didn't respect our family anymore. My father said more than once that if I cared at all, I would just leave town so they could salvage what was left of their reputation. I felt invisible in my own house. Some nights, I wished someone would ask if I was eating enough, if I was scared about the pain of giving birth, if I had anyone to lean on. But those questions never came. What I got instead were more accusations, more demands to reveal the father's name. Every time my father barked the question, I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. Because I knew the truth would change nothing. If I told them it was Jordan, they wouldn't run to my side. They would run to his. His family had money, power, and influence. My parents had already chosen which side they were on, and it wasn't mine. So I kept the secret close to my chest. Even as their lies crushed me, even as my brother turned away, I held on to it. It was the only piece of control I still had in a life that felt like it was falling apart. His name was Jordan Hale. The first time I saw him, we were both freshmen in high school. He was the kind of boy everyone noticed, tall, easy smile, always surrounded by people. But with me, he was different. He listened. He made me feel like I wasn't invisible in a family that only cared about appearances. By junior year, we were inseparable. He walked me to class, called me late at night just to hear my voice, and told me I was the only girl he could see himself with. Jordan's family was nothing like mine. They were wealthy, well-known in town, and respected by everyone at church. His father owned a chain of businesses, and his mother organized fundraisers and community events. When people spoke the Hale name, it was with admiration. I knew my parents would have approved of him in any other circumstance. That was part of why I trusted him so much. I thought he was safe, solid, someone who wouldn't run away. When I found out I was pregnant, Jordan was the first person I told. My hands were shaking as I showed him the test, my voice cracking as I said, "We'll figure this out together, right?" For a moment he looked shocked, but then he pulled me into his arms and said, "I'll be here, Imani. I promise." I wanted to believe him so badly. And for a little while I did. But promises can turn to dust overnight. A week later, his texts slowed down. Then his calls stopped. When I showed up at his house, his mother answered the door and said he wasn't home. I could hear him upstairs. I stood there, humiliated, realizing she was covering for him. After that, he blocked me on everything. No explanation, no goodbye, just silence. I kept hoping he would come back, that he'd show up and prove he meant what he said. But he never did. The boy who swore I was his whole world left me standing alone in mine. And when my parents demanded to know who the father was, I bit down on the truth. Because if I said his name, I knew what would happen. They would have forgiven him in an instant. They would have told me to stay quiet, to protect his reputation, to protect his family. My parents worshipped status, and the Hales had plenty of it. I could already imagine my father shaking Jordan's hand, saying, "We'll keep this between us," while my mother comforted his parents about their poor son's mistake. And me? I would still be the problem, the stain on the Carter name. So I stayed silent. Every time my parents pressed me, I felt the words burning at the back of my throat, but I swallowed them. Jordan Hale might have been the father, but I refused to give my parents or his family the power to rewrite my story. His name would remain my secret, even if it meant carrying the weight alone. Moving out was not part of my plan, but my parents made it impossible to stay. Every day in that house felt like a punishment, every glance from them heavy with judgment. I packed my clothes into 2 trash bags and left without looking back. The apartment I found was small, barely big enough for a bed and a chair, but it was mine. I got a job at a diner just off the highway, working long hours for tips that barely covered rent and groceries. Still, it was freedom, even if it was laced with struggle. Pregnancy was harder than I expected. The first few months were filled with sickness that wouldn't let up. Some mornings I could hardly stand, but I forced myself to get to work because missing a shift meant less money, and less money meant hunger or eviction. At night, I'd press my hand against my growing belly, whispering to the little life inside me, promising her we'd get through it together. One night, I collapsed in the bathroom with cramps so sharp I thought I might lose the baby. I lay there on the cold floor, shaking, praying out loud for the first time in months. No one came. No one even knew. I dragged myself back to bed and told no one at work, no one at church, and certainly not my parents. They didn't deserve to know, not after turning their backs on me. I carried that pain in silence, afraid but determined. While I was fighting to survive, Jordan was parading around town with someone new. Her name was Celeste, and she came from another well-off family. I saw their pictures plastered all over the bulletin board at the diner, smiling at football games, holding hands at community events, acting like they were the golden couple everyone admired. He looked so happy, like our history never existed. The first time I saw them together in person, I froze. He was standing in the grocery store, laughing as he pushed the cart for her. His eyes brushed past me like I was a stranger. My chest tightened, but I didn't say a word. I just walked past, clutching the basket in my hand, pretending I didn't care. But inside, I felt like I was breaking into 1,000 pieces. That was the day it truly hit me. No one was coming to save me. Not my parents, not my brother, not Jordan. The only person I could depend on was me. As painful as it was to admit, that realization lit something inside me, a fire that refused to die. From then on, I worked harder. I stretched every dollar, cut corners wherever I could, and kept pushing through the exhaustion. I carried my loneliness like armor. If the world wanted me to fail, I was going to prove them wrong. I would raise this child on my own, even if it meant crawling through the dark to get there. The first time I saw my parents again after moving out was at a family gathering. My aunt had invited me, saying it would be good for me to reconnect. I almost didn't go, but part of me still craved a place at the table, a reminder that I wasn't completely erased from the family. I put on the only nice dress I had left and showed up, hoping maybe they'd soften. Maybe they'd see me as their daughter again. The minute I walked in, I felt the tension. Conversations hushed, eyes flicked toward me, and the air grew heavy. My mother's smile was tight, brittle, like she was forcing herself not to frown. My father avoided looking at me altogether. I tried to sit quietly in the corner, but soon enough, their voices cut through the room. She destroyed the Carter name. My mother announced loud enough for everyone to hear. Everything we built, gone because of her choices. My father nodded, his tone sharper. We raised her better, but she threw it all away. Do you know how humiliating it is to walk into church every Sunday with people whispering behind your back? Heat rushed to my face as the room fell silent. I could feel my relatives staring, some with pity, some with judgment. My aunt looked down at her plate, too afraid to speak up. I wanted to sink into the floor, disappear before my tears betrayed me. But I forced myself to stay still, jaw clenched, hands trembling in my lap. I slipped out to the kitchen to breathe, to collect myself, when I overheard them talking in the hallway. My parents were speaking in low voices, but the words carried. At least the Hales kept their promise, my father said. Protecting Jordan's name was the right thing. Their family has done so much for this community. My mother sighed. Yes, and better for us too. Imagine the shame if people knew it was him. No, keeping quiet saved us all. The blood drained from my face. For a moment, I thought I misheard, but then it sank in, they knew. They had always known Jordan was the father. They hadn't been protecting me, they'd been protecting him. Protecting his wealthy, respected family, while throwing me to the wolves. The betrayal cut deeper than anything before. It wasn't just abandonment anymore. It was a choice. They had chosen status, reputation, and connections over their own daughter. They watched me struggle, let me become an outcast, and still found ways to humiliate me, all while hiding the truth to save a boy who had left me broken. I leaned against the wall, fighting back sobs that threatened to choke me. For the first time, I understood there was no hope of winning them back. Their loyalty was never to me, it was to the image they worshipped. In that moment, something inside me hardened. Whatever love I had left for them turned to ash. The night Zara was born was both the most terrifying and the most beautiful night of my life. The contractions started while I was finishing a late shift at the diner. I remember gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white, trying to breathe through the pain until one of my co-workers begged me to let them call an ambulance. By the time I was wheeled into the hospital, sweat was dripping down my back and tears blurred my vision. I was alone. No one held my hand. No one whispered that it would be okay. The delivery room was filled only with nurses and the sound of my own cries. Hours felt like days as I fought through wave after wave of pain, and there were moments I didn't think I could do it. But then, at the break of dawn, her first cry filled the room. The moment they placed her on my chest, everything else faded. She was tiny, warm, and perfect. I named her Zara because it meant light, and she was exactly that, the light breaking through all my darkness. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope. Maybe when my parents heard, they would soften. Maybe seeing their granddaughter would melt the ice in their hearts. I called them from the hospital bed, voice trembling as I said, "She's here. Your granddaughter is here." Silence stretched on the other end before my mother finally spoke. "That child is not family," she said coldly. My father's voice followed, hard and final. "Don't ever call us about this again." Then the line went dead. The rejection hit me harder than any contraction. I stared at Zara's little face, her tiny fingers curling around mine, and I felt a rush of anger mix with the love swelling in my chest. How could they deny her? How could they look at an innocent child and decide she wasn't worthy of their bloodline? That was the moment I realized I could never depend on them again. Not for help, not for love, not even for acknowledgement. I held Zara close and whispered promises into her soft hair. I promised she would never feel unwanted. I promised she would grow up knowing she was loved beyond measure. I promised I would protect her from the cruelty of people who valued reputation more than family. But beneath those promises, something else stirred. A seed I didn't want to name yet. A quiet vow that one day, they would regret turning their backs on us. One day, they would have to face the truth they worked so hard to bury. As I rocked Zara to sleep in that sterile hospital room, exhaustion pulling at my body, I knew two things for certain. I was going to raise her alone, and I was going to raise her strong. And when the time came, the people who had cast us aside would learn just how much strength they had underestimated. For years passed in what felt like a blur. Zara had grown into a bright, curious little girl with wide eyes that carried my strength and Jordan's undeniable features. Every time I looked at her, I was reminded of the battles I fought alone. The nights of rocking her to sleep with tears streaming down my face, the mornings of working double shifts just to keep food on the table, the moments of fear that I wasn't enough. But through it all, she thrived, and so did I. I had learned to stand on my own. I moved into a better apartment, earned a promotion at work, and built a small circle of people who treated Zara and me like family. I was no longer the frightened girl begging for acceptance. I had become a woman who knew her worth, even if the people who should have loved me first had abandoned me. Then the news came. Jordan Hale was engaged. His fiancée was Celeste Morgan, the polished daughter of a wealthy businessman. Their engagement was the talk of the town, splashed across newspapers and gossiped about at church. Pictures of them smiling, holding hands, dripping in luxury, seemed to follow me everywhere. The part that stung most wasn't that he was marrying someone else. I had buried my feelings for him long ago. It was that my parents were involved. I learned through a cousin that the Carter and Hale families were working together to plan the wedding. Banquets, church receptions, family dinners. My parents were at the center of it all, smiling and laughing as if the past never happened. The same parents who cast me out were celebrating with the boy who abandoned me, joining forces to protect their image, their so-called reputation. The hypocrisy burned like fire in my chest. For years, I had carried the shame they placed on me, endured whispers and judgment, all while they pretended to be righteous pillars of the community. And now, here they were, side by side with the Hales, pretending none of it mattered. Pretending Zara didn't exist. Pretending I didn't exist. One evening, as Zara played on the living room floor with her dolls, I sat on the couch, staring at the wedding announcement in the local paper. Jordan and Celeste's smiling faces seemed to mock me. I folded the paper carefully and set it aside, my hands trembling not with weakness but with clarity. For the first time in years, I felt the old wound reopen, but this time, it didn't leave me broken. It fueled me. I realized something in that moment. I had been surviving all these years, but I hadn't yet spoken my truth. And the people who betrayed me were walking freely, untouched by the damage they caused. That was going to change. I looked at Zara, her tiny voice humming a song as she lined up her dolls. She deserved to know the truth one day. And the world deserved to hear it too. The wedding would not just be a union of two families. It would be the perfect stage. My parents and Jordan had chosen their reputations over me, but I was done being silent. Their time was coming. The church was decorated in gold and ivory, every pew lined with flowers, every detail perfect. Guests whispered excitedly as they waited for the moment when Jordan Hale and Celeste Morgan would tie their families together in wealth and prestige. My parents were there, dressed in their finest, beaming as though they had a right to celebrate. They sat near the front, proud, as if they had never disowned me, as if I hadn't been erased from their lives the moment I chose to keep my child. I wasn't invited, but that didn't stop me. I walked through the doors with Zara's small hand in mine. Heads turned instantly, whispers spreading like wildfire. I felt the weight of every eye on me, but I kept walking, each step steady and deliberate. Zara looked up at me, confused by the attention, but I squeezed her hand, silently telling her it was okay. Jordan was at the altar, smiling for the crowd, waiting for his bride. When he saw me, his smile faltered, his face draining of color. He glanced toward his parents, then toward mine, panic flickering in his eyes. I didn't wait for permission, didn't care for the gasps that echoed as I stepped forward. My voice carried through the sanctuary, stronger than it had ever been. "Before you marry this man," I said, my gaze fixed on Celeste, "you should know who he really is." The room fell silent. Celeste froze halfway down the aisle, clutching her bouquet tightly. Jordan muttered under his breath, "Imani, don't." But I ignored him. "This man standing before you," I continued, "is not as perfect as he pretends. For years ago, when I told him I was pregnant, he promised to stay by my side. Instead, he disappeared. He left me to struggle alone, abandoned me and the child we made together. A murmur rippled through the crowd. I pulled Zara gently forward, placing her where everyone could see her. Her little face, her eyes, the unmistakable resemblance to Jordan. There was no denying it. Gasps filled the air, some guests standing in shock. "Meet Zara," I said, my voice breaking but steady. "Jordan's daughter. The one he refused to acknowledge. The one both the Hale and Carter families chose to erase." Celeste's face crumbled, tears welling as she stared at Zara. She dropped her bouquet, the flowers scattering across the aisle, and turned to Jordan. "Is it true?" she demanded. His silence was answer enough. She shook her head, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I can't do this," before storming out of the church. Chaos erupted. Guests whispered louder, some glaring at my parents, others at the Hales. My mother's hand flew to her chest, and my father's face turned crimson with anger. But it was too late. The truth was out, and the perfect image they had worked so hard to preserve shattered in front of everyone. I stood tall, Zara by my side, unflinching in the storm. For the first time, I wasn't the one silenced. I was the one who silenced them. The chaos in the church didn't die down quickly. Voices clashed, questions flew, and all eyes kept darting between Jordan, Celeste's abandoned bouquet, and Zara clinging to my hand. My parents, Marvin and Denise Carter, pushed through the crowd toward me, their faces hard, their voices sharp with panic. "Imani, stop this madness right now," my father hissed, his hand gripping my arm as if he could drag me into silence. My mother leaned in, her smile forced, whispering, "Think about what you're doing. You'll ruin everything, for us, for this family. Put the child away and walk out quietly." But the whispers around us had already shifted into condemnation. Church elders who once praised my parents for their piety now looked at them with narrowed eyes. "So this is what you've been hiding?" One woman muttered loudly enough for others to hear. "Preaching righteousness while casting out your own daughter, all to protect the Hale's son?" My father stiffened, trying to put on his usual commanding tone. "This is a private matter, not for gossip." But it was too late. Someone stood and said, "You raised us to believe in accountability, Marvin. Yet you let your son-in-law-to-be abandon his child and covered it up." Heads nodded, murmurs of agreement spreading like wildfire. Denise's voice cracked as she tried to salvage her image. "We acted in wisdom. We were protecting Imani from shame." "Protecting?" I cut in, my voice steady and sharp. "You didn't protect me. You abandoned me. You threw me out of your house when I needed you the most. And you let everyone think I was the disgrace while you smiled in church every Sunday as if you were saints." Gasps filled the sanctuary again, but this time they weren't for me. They were for my parents. For years they had been seen as pillars of morality, the family everyone respected. Now the cracks in their foundation showed for all to see. Marvin's face turned crimson and he spat. "We gave you life, Imani. Don't you dare turn on us like this." I held Zara closer, lifting my chin. "You gave me life, but the moment it mattered, you took mine away. You erased me so you could keep your standing, while I worked 2 jobs to feed the child your perfect families wanted to erase. Don't speak to me of loyalty when you showed me none." The silence after my words was suffocating. Then, one by one, people began to move away from my parents. Old friends avoided their gaze, whispers of hypocrites and liars chasing them down the aisle. Their empire of respect, built on polished lies, crumbled in a single morning. Marvin reached for me again, desperation replacing anger. "Imani, please, let's talk, we can fix this." I stepped back. "No. You chose your reputation over your daughter. There's no fixing that." And with Zara's hand in mine, I walked out of the church, leaving their fall behind me. The church doors swung shut behind me, and for the first time in years, the weight pressing on my chest seemed to lift. My hand gripped Zara's tiny fingers, her little steps hurrying to match mine as we walked away from the gasps, the whispers, and the shattered illusions of the Carter and Hale families. "Mommy," Zara whispered, tilting her head up at me. "Are we going home?" I paused, breathing in the cool air, feeling the sting of tears in my eyes. "No, baby," I said softly, kneeling to her level. "We're going somewhere better. Somewhere just for us." For too long, I had let my life be dictated by other people's pride. My parents' obsession with their name, Jordan's cowardice, the town's cruel gossip. But as I looked into Zara's wide, innocent eyes, I realized something undeniable. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had survived without it, and now I had more than survival. I had purpose. In the weeks that followed, I sold what little I owned, saved every dollar from my job, and packed up our tiny apartment. My parents made no effort to reach out. Perhaps they were too busy salvaging the pieces of their reputation. Jordan tried once, sending a pathetic message asking to talk things out. But I never replied. His chance had passed the moment he chose silence over responsibility. I chose a city far enough away that no one knew the Carter name, no one cared about the Hales, and no one whispered about a girl ruined by her own family. For the first time, Imani wasn't the disgrace, or the problem, or the one who ruined the name. I was simply me, a woman rebuilding herself with quiet strength and a child who depended on her. The new city embraced us with anonymity. I found work at a community center, helping young mothers like me who were struggling to find their footing. Every day, I poured my pain into purpose, and slowly, I began to see my scars as proof of survival instead of shame. Zara thrived. She laughed easily, made friends quickly, and carried a joy I had once feared she'd never know. At night, when I tucked her into bed, she would wrap her arms around my neck and whisper, "You're the best mommy in the world." And every time, my heart swelled because I knew she wasn't just comforting me, she was speaking the truth. One evening, as the sun set over the skyline of our new home, Zara and I stood on the balcony of our small apartment, the city glowing beneath us. I held her close, breathing in the moment. "They said I ruined their name," I whispered to myself, the words no longer heavy but freeing. But the truth is, I reclaimed mine. And with Zara's laughter ringing in my ears, I knew I had finally found something stronger than their judgment: dignity, freedom, and the power to define my own story. Do you think Imani made the right choice by cutting ties and starting fresh with Zara? Or should she have given her parents and Jordan another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next one.